History. History, history, history. Early hours of this morning, Bafana made history. The South African football national team made history. I spoke about it on my TikTok, how Bafana qualifying to the round of 32 of the 2026 FIFA World Cup is bigger than football, it's bigger than sport. And people who are not from South Africa, people who don't really have knowledge about South Africa, knowledge about the history of South Africa, won't understand how big this win is. Being from South Africa myself, obviously on my TikTok I've spoken about how I have South African and Nigerian heritage, so obviously, when it comes to football, like, there's a bit of conflict there. Obviously, if you're in South Africa, if you're in Africa, South Africa and Nigeria don't really like each other, so obviously that's a dynamic I have to deal with. I still love both countries. From a footballing perspective, I do love Nigeria a bit more, but I still want South Africa to do well. So, like I said, South Africa qualifying to the round of 32 fills me with immense pride. And it's a testament to perseverance. It's a testament to adaptability, tactical adaptability, because of course the first game against Mexico was absolutely terrible. Absolutely dreadful. Not the way in which Bafana played in the qualifiers. Not the way that so many of the good players in this team have played at club level for their clubs, for Pirates, Sundowns, etc. And obviously, you have to give credit to everyone involved, not just Hugo Bruce, not just the players, but every single person involved, from the fans, us, obviously, people who wake up late, wake up early hours of the morning, people who travel to Mexico, America, Canada, etc. People who travel, support the boys. Massive credit. And the reason why I say it's bigger than football is because I want you to look at this. I want you to just look at these scenes. Look at these scenes right here. Look at these scenes. Like, just look at these scenes. Look at what it means to these guys. Like, look at what it means. This is years of suffering, because a lot of these boys, they've suffered not going to the World Cup, seeing other nations, seeing their peers go to the World Cup, missing out on winning the AFCON, missing out on things, obviously, like I said, the history of this country. If you're from South Africa, you'll know the history of apartheid and all these things, enduring all these kinds of things, and now getting to this point. This country used to be a country where segregation was the way of life. And now you can see everybody, you can see every single person united for one mission, one cause. No DNA, just RSA. That is a mentality, that is a motto that has been built over years of suffering, from a footballing sense, from a life sense. And that's why I say you can only really understand it if you're from South Africa, or if you have knowledge about South Africa, because qualifying to the round of 32 in the manner South Africa did, it shows the perseverance and the growth this country has had, not just in football, but also from a socio-economic point of view. Like I said, obviously South Africa was a country where segregation and obviously racial discrimination, etc. You can research about apartheid, to find out about it. If you really want to go into depth, if you really want to go into detail and see how people of color, see how so many people suffered, etc. But like I said, everybody's united, whether you're black, white, everybody is united. People are supporting the country. People are actually finding reason to get motivated to wake up at 3 a.m. because Bafana is giving them hope. The same way the Springboks is able to unite South Africa when South Africa plays rugby, that is a similar thing that Bafana is doing. And like I said, you have to give credit to everyone. You have to give credit to everyone. You just have to give credit. You have to give credit. And obviously, the performance much improved from the Mexico and the Czechia game. Even though in the Czechia game, I think in the second half, Bafana were the better team. I think Czechia was the better team in the first half. Bafana were better in the second half. But obviously, you know, the game is a reflection. The game is a reflection, as you can see. You know, Bafana had 1.1 expected goals. South Korea, I believe they had 0.9 expected goals, which further proves, South Korea had 1 expected goal, which further proves that South Africa deserved the win. South Africa deserved to win, and like I said, it's a massive improvement from the previous game. It's a massive improvement from the previous game, and particularly the redemption of players like Pepelo Sitole, like everybody was clowning on him, everybody was, roasting him, but he persevered. And this is the kind of mentality I'm talking about, because a lot of these South African players have had to endure hardships, not just in football, but in life. Like they've had to go through, their parents and all this have had to go through some really bad things. So I feel like that mentality, you can't just teach it. It's either you're born with it, it's either you have it or you don't have it. Like, yes, you can develop mentality, in other ways from experience, but certain things you just have to know how to have it. You just have to know, And obviously, like I said, I didn't watch the game. I was sleeping. But obviously, looking at the highlights, looking at the stats, seeing the reception around the game, it's just much better than the Mexico game. That's why it was such a disappointment to see the way to see the way we played against Mexico. But obviously, like I said, it's a testament to the perseverance. It's a testament to the character. It's a testament to everything. It's a testament to the character, the perseverance. It's a testament to everything that has built up to this moment. And obviously, like I said, massive credit goes to the coach. Massive credit. Against Mexico, he played the 5-back. He played defensive, tried to play out from the back, didn't really work out. Didn't really play, he didn't really play wingers. He didn't really play the likes of Mufokeng, the likes of Maseko, these players that are gonna create magic, who are gonna unlock teams. But Czechia, we saw the improvements. This game, we saw the improvements, and that's why the country has qualified to the round of 32. And obviously, the game against Canada will be a very interesting game. It will be a very interesting game. I don't think there's much between the two teams. I think apart from two world-class level players that Canada have, like Jonathan David, Alphonso Davies, I don't think there's much separating those two teams. I think the result of that game will be determined by the performances of those two players that I mentioned. But obviously, from a South Africa perspective, it depends on how the likes of Maseko, Mufokeng, Mokoena, can he control the midfield? Can Mbokazi continue to defend excellently like he's been doing? These are the things you have to look at. And obviously, you can't really, I don't want to predict who's going to win because you never know. Obviously, people can say Canada on paper have the better players and Canada have the better team, better players, and they're in North America. Even though Canada are not playing in Canada, they're still in North America, which is still a massive advantage for them. Anything can happen in football. Anything can happen. Anything can happen in this game. We saw how Spain drew with Cabo Verde. We've seen so many crazy results at this tournament already. Crazy performances from goalkeepers. And I think this game is actually one of the most closely contested games that we'll see in the knockout stage. And I actually think the performance of the goalkeepers for both teams will be what wins the teams the games. A lot of the times we talk about how it's the midfield battle, and I do think if Sitole and Mokoena can have a really, really solid game, I think South Africa will win. But obviously, if Canada's midfield perform well, obviously Kone is injured. Hopefully he gets well soon. But I think Canada not having Kone is a big, big blow because he's a very, very good player. From what I saw of him in the Bosnia game, he's a very good player. He controls the play well. You know, he's got energy. So Canada not having Kone will be a big blow. But at the same time, I still think there's not much between the teams. You know, I think it comes down to finishing and goalkeeping performances. Like I said, you know, goalkeeping performances, because obviously with Canada and with South Africa, I feel like where those two teams have struggled has been ruthless finishing. You know, it's, you know, with South Africa, the games against Mexico. I mean, obviously in the game against Mexico, South Africa didn't really create too many chances. But in the game against Czechia, there were moments where South Africa had chances in the second half, but they couldn't take the chances. They didn't take their chances, and that's why they didn't win. Even though Mokoena scored the penalty, South Africa just couldn't. We couldn't get over the line because the finishing wasn't there. You know, and obviously in the game against South Korea, the goal came from good finishing, great finish from Maseko. But with Canada, it's the same thing. I watched the Canada game against Bosnia, and Canada really should have demolished Bosnia. If you actually watch that game, Canada should have absolutely wiped the floor with Bosnia. But bad finishing, Jonathan David didn't really have a good game, you know, and even when Carl Laren came on and equalized, he could have also scored, but massive blocks from the Bosnia defenders is what prevented Canada from winning. So I think that's why I say goalkeeping performances, defensive performances, but ultimately quality in the final third will decide this game. Because I look at the midfields of both teams and there's not really that much between them in terms of quality. Especially because Kone is injured for Canada. I think if Kone was playing, that would give Canada the slight edge in midfield. But I think with Kone being injured, it's actually really not that big of a difference. I think the final third and the defense is where this game will be won. That's what I personally think. But like I said, Bafana, so proud, so proud. Even though my other country, Nigeria, unfortunately didn't qualify, and hopefully 2030 we do qualified. We have qualified, we will qualify, hopefully. God willing, of course. I'm so proud of Bafana. Like, I am just so proud. Like, I am so proud. Like, you know, seeing how this country was getting mocked in football, you know, like, and seeing the steady growth, the steady progression, you know, like, even in AFCON, you know, beating the likes of Egypt, beating the likes of Nigeria, beating, you know, I think South Africa also beat Morocco a couple of AFCONs ago. You know, seeing the steady progression of South Africa, you know, it's something that is beautiful to see. And I was actually discussing this with my mother. I think it was yesterday or today after the game, and I was saying to her, like, South Africa needs to be ambitious. South Africa needs to be ambitious and needs to use qualifying to the round of 32 to be ambitious. And potentially, some people may be shocked when I say this, have a similar run to Morocco in 2022. Because what's to say South Africa can't beat Canada, get to the round of 16? Yes, South Africa's going to face Netherlands or Morocco, but getting to the round of 16 will give those players a lot of confidence. You know, it will give them so much confidence that they can play freely, and they're not going to be the ones under pressure. They have nothing to lose. Because at the end of the day, even if Bafana get knocked out in the round of 16, whatever, they're not under huge pressure. Netherlands and Morocco have to qualify to at least the quarterfinals minimum because of what they did in 2022, because of how they played in the AFCON. You know, Holland, we know, one of the biggest footballing nations, you know, so many legendary players. They came close in 2010. I don't need to say why Holland should be beating South Africa. You know, I don't need to be saying why they should beat South Africa in the round of 16. So obviously Morocco and Netherlands are under more pressure. They're under way more pressure than South Africa. So I actually feel like if South Africa obviously beats Canada, then those teams will be the ones with the pressure, and it will allow Bafana to just play freely, play with freedom, play, you know, obviously not be naive and be tactically naive and, you know, play into the hands and play how Morocco and Holland want to play, but at the same time, it will allow Hugo Broos, it will allow these players to really excel because they won't be the ones under pressure, you know. And like I said, this is something that South Africa has to use in order to catapult itself into being a respected and feared nation in African football and ultimately global football. For me, now that South Africa has gone to the knockouts, next AFCON, South Africa should try and win the AFCON. Try and win the AFCON. You know, try and win the AFCON, or at least try to get to the semi-finals. You know, this AFCON, South Africa, previous AFCON, South Africa lost to Cameroon in the semi-finals or in the round of 16 or the quarterfinals, I believe. I could be wrong. Somebody fact check me on that. But obviously, losing to Cameroon in the manner South Africa did, South Africa, I think, in the second half of the game when Mahopa came on, I think South Africa looked better, but I think overall Cameroon deserved to win. And this is why I'm saying South Africa needs to continue to perform like how they performed against South Korea and win an AFCON, win a major international trophy in order to become feared, in order to become respected, in order to build confidence in the players for the next World Cups, in order to really make South Africans dream and potentially get close or even be on the same level that we are on when it comes to rugby, when it comes to so many other sports. But yeah, so proud of Bafana. Canada, round of 32. We will be there. I will be discussing my thoughts after the game, so stay tuned for that.